Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the first ever Heighten Up webinar, the first in the series of other webinars that we'll be holding as an organization. Just like we publicized, this activity will start exactly at 3 o'clock, and we are fortunate to have two of our speakers on board with us. So we are going to go straight ahead. The topic for today's webinar is titled Corporate Gender Diversity and Inclusion, Understanding the Complete Picture. First of all, I would like to speak briefly about the organization that is holding this webinar called Heighten Up. And we are an organization focused on workplace gender diversity and inclusion, a subject that has attracted a lot of discussion in the past few years. So our focus is to ensure that we try as much as possible to contribute towards the gender equality discussion. We do this using research and data analysis, education and awareness creation, training and project delivery. We recently launched the first ever corporate gender diversity and inclusion index in the country, and we are currently executing that. This index is called the Ghana Corporate Gender Index. And the whole idea is to help rank and rate corporate organizations that operate in Ghana based on the activities that promote gender diversity and inclusion. And today, like I mentioned earlier, we are holding our first ever webinar. And we are very fortunate to have two very distinguished individuals to act as our resource persons for today's activity. The first is Dr. Hazzel Berrard Amuah, who is the HR Director for Guiness Ghana PLC. And we would kindly take a quick view at who Dr. Hazzel is. She's a multiple award-winning seasoned HR professional with over 20 years experience in the field. She's a Henley certified coach from the UK and has a cross-cultural certification from the USA. Her work experience is in FMCG, energy, and financial sectors. She has worked across 22 countries, particularly in Central and West Africa. She currently works as a freelance consultant in business strategy and human capital, and is the HR Director at Guiness Ghana PLC. Thank you very much, Dr. Hazzel, and thanks for accepting to join us for today's session. The next person is Mr. Nehemiah Attigah, aka Attigah. He wears a lot of hats, so we don't know how to describe him, but he's a very passionate person when it comes to technology, service, and social justice. He is the Director of Projects Ghana Think Foundation. He's also the CEO of Hatua Tech Limited, an IT solutions firm. He's the principal lead of Odikro, an open data-driven parliamentary monitoring organization. He's the co-founder and CEO of Sea Afrique, a tourism company. He's equally the co-founder and CEO of the Code Factory Africa, which is building a new corps of software engineers in Ghana, Cameroon, and Rwanda. So as you can see, we have two of the most appropriate and distinguished individuals who would handle this subject for us today. I'll quickly just run us through what exactly we would be touching on today and then allow our speakers to come in. So on the subject of gender diversity and inclusion, which is what we are looking at today, will be understanding the full picture. We are going to look at what exactly gender diversity and inclusion is. How does that play out in organization, and which aspects of those organizations' operations is it really associated with? Are there any significant benefits to those organizations and the society at large? Are there challenges that come along with it? And what are some of the strategies that these organizations use in maneuvering such challenges? So I wouldn't speak much about this. I would like to introduce our guests to take up their session. But before I do, two individuals will be moderating today's session. The one speaking is Mr. Prince Kelly Anyamiche, the Business Development and Communications Manager for Heighten Up. The other person is Madam Josephine Honam Agbeku, who is the fundraising lead of Heighten Up. Thank you very much. And I would now like to introduce Dr. Amuah to take up the podium and deliver his session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be on this call. Personally, I'm sure Doreen reached out to me because she realized that I'm very passionate about everything that has to do with gender, diversity, and inclusion. It's a very broad subject that I think has taken a lot of business attention in recent times. If we look at the subject, diversity and inclusion, it's one big subject of which gender forms a part. So we now classify it as gender, diversity, and inclusion. It presupposes that the focus on gender is heightened. Now, permit me to spend a few minutes to just describe or explain what, in my view, constitutes diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion is a very broad topic, including race, color, nationality, ethnicity, profession, religion, language, disability, multi-generation, and etc., etc. The Western world has now added a very sensitive topic in Africa, or Western Central Africa, which is now called sexual orientation as a pillar. In West Africa, and certainly in Ghana, because of our cultural and religious beliefs, sexual orientation is not a pillar of diversity and inclusion that we propound and endorse. To that extent, even though we know it's a human rights issue in terms of how we treat human beings on the whole, we don't spend too much time focusing on that because of our internal peculiarities. As a country, our governments have spoken largely on this. We've had social groups speak a lot about this. Our legal structure is actually silent on this, but we pay attention to give human rights the equality in terms of respect for another human being. This afternoon's focus is gender as a pillar of diversity, and that's what I'm going to zoom my discussion on in terms of how we leverage on gender as a business, as an institution, as a society, etc., etc. Now, how does gender play out in organizations, and what aspects of the organization's operations can it be related with? That's a very easy question for me to answer because it's everything. If you ask me what I think, I would say it plays out from recruitment when you begin to scout for an equal balance of gender representation across functional levels. It plays out in how people are developed and how people are trained. It plays out in how we present gender for succession planning for business development, for people who are assessed for higher jobs or different jobs in the organization. It plays out in how innovative we are in brainstorming sessions and how women and men don't think alike. When you want to think about who goes for shopping, the world has changed a bit these days, but once upon a time, you'd find more women shopping. To that extent, if you're producing a good that women have to shop for the household, if you put only men in the boardroom, what are you actually producing for shopping to be done? You are producing goods that women cannot appreciate and shop for. So, to that extent, it's important to have women in the boardroom. Secondly, also, in that context, you realize that men and women don't think the same. Women by nature are predisposed to be more creative and innovative than men. By and large, there's a lot of data to show that in terms of studies done in that regard. So if you don't put women and men in the same room to have a gender balance, you actually shoot yourself in the foot. For team dynamics, for team temperaments, for emotions, how they play out, etc., you have to have a balance of male and female in that section as well. In terms of business strategy, if you want to have diversity of thought stemming through your boardroom, you have to have an equal balance of gender in that boardroom because perspectives are very critical in crafting areas where the final say, the final plan should have a leadership dimension, showing thought leadership from both a male and female perspective. Now, in terms of reflecting on the role of gender and diversity in the company, therefore, I would say it has to do with everything. The entire operations of a company are focused or are built on having a gender diversity. And it's important that the human capital dimension is considered fully in that regard. It is important, therefore, in this message to say that companies who do not have a gender balance are lacking a certain quality of decision-making in every aspect of the organization. From a benefit perspective, the benefits are uncountable, they are huge. First of all, it's a competitive differentiator from beginning to the end. From the end-to-end process of every company, gender diversity is a competitive differentiator. Everything from overall increase in business performance stems from diversity in thinking. Everything around improved customer numbers and quality of customers attracted stems from diversity. Everything that contributes to the increased revenues and profits stems from diversity of thinking because you have different viewpoints coming to the boardroom to make better decisions. Ultimately, this diversity impacts market share of a company and profitability to that extent. Every strategic development from execution to development to execution is influenced by diversity. The culture of the company, the color of the company, to be more inclusive, has to be balanced with both male and female. The health of the organization is based on the gender diversity of the company. So, to that extent also, if you look at leadership and the role it plays in diversity, male, female leaders, either you juxtapose them either way, are very impactful in having team dynamics become more vibrant. So to understand teams better, the blend is important. To have better team engagement, the blend is important. To have effective coaching, the blend is important. To have mentoring, the blend is important. So everything from retention to retirement of employees and institutions, you have to have a gender balance playing out. That is the height, the width, the depth, and the importance of gender diversity and inclusion in business. Beyond the organization as an entity, how beneficial is gender and diversity in contributing towards the society and the world at large? Oh my goodness, I wish you had more female presidents in this world of ours. We see the impact of female presidents and what they can do to our different parts of the world. Some key differentiation when it comes to people is about empathy and intuition. And by and large, studies have shown that women are more intuitive and empathetic than men. If you want to have a woman leader who has an emotional connection with people, it's easier to get things done. By and large, this is a generalist statement, but most research proves that women are more empathetic and more intuitive leaders than men. There are times you have to have a data-driven decision-making process to get things done, but if you have the intuition, sometimes it makes a very important impact in society and the world at large. So the two key leadership attributes that we are talking about in this context of gender diversity inclusion is empathy and inclusion, to really help people unleash their full potential. To be able to deal with somebody who has challenges and cannot really share problems with another person, if you don't have empathy and intuition, how do you get that person to speak up and share their challenges for them to be solved and for them to be groomed for higher heights? And therefore, I would suggest on this platform that women are generally more compassionate, and this speaks the kindness quotient theory, which I've recently propounded and sharing much on social media. The kindness quotient stems from empathy, and the more empathy you have as a human being, the better leader you become. And therefore, women are predispositioned to become better leaders. Gender diversity, inclusion, we want to focus on women to help the leadership of the company to become better to a very large extent. The next thought was around the company strategy in terms of rolling out and implementing the D&I policies that scroll around gender and the kind of programs that can be developed and implemented in the company. Several, I've mentioned few. Flexible working hours. What time do people start work? What time do they close? Traffic is a real menace in this country. We have people living in all kinds of the country and having to commute across to be able to go to work. If you have flexible working hours or flexible work, it attracts more women to the workplace, and then therefore we can have that diversity and the benefits of gender diversity coming to the table because you have more women in the pool. Increased maternity and increased paternity. You can never talk about maternity without paternity. It takes 2 to tango and 2 to make a baby. In the life we live in, it takes a male and a female to make a baby. So when you have to give leave or time off for a woman who gives birth, you may want to consider the father who also helps the woman in the process, all things being equal. So an increased maternity helps to attract more women to company, and therefore that was a thinking that we had here in Diageo, where we increased the maternity leave from 4 months to 6 months. The statutory leave is 3 months. We went up to 4 months. Now we have 6 months for maternity in terms of the leave policy we offer here in Diageo. And we have a 1-month paternity for males as well, so that we have that balance to attract male and female to the company. You don't want to have only women working for the company. You want to have the balance of gender in the organization. And a compressed week. Can we have people working from Monday to Thursday, doing longer hours and having a Friday off to have a more balance in their lives? When people are more balanced, they're more productive, they're more innovative, they're more creative, they're more relaxed, they're more healthy, and can contribute more positively to the business agenda of any institution. Have we faced challenges, or have I faced challenges as a human resource capital expert in implementing diversity policies? Oh, yes, I have. In the corners of gender and trying to drive policies like flexible work, it is a very challenging one. Reason being that in our part of the world, we have data that costs so much. If people have to connect their laptops from home, oftentimes they complain around things like, I need more data to be able to work effectively from my home. I'm having this call from home. As you can tell, I'm in my t-shirt, I have my face towel, because today is one of the days I'm doing flexi work. Half the time I work a few days from home and a few days from the office. So my week is not fully present in the office. The policy is around performance and not presence. It's about my output and not my physical presence in the office. So if I'm able to stay at home and deliver even a more effective deliverable when it comes to my work, then why not endorse flexible working where I can telecommute and work from home? The other point is really about making sure that there is always data to support how people are really present and connected to the organization. Gender and diversity is such a policy or such a program that will make sure that there is embracing of every individual to join the party. So how do we engage fully, psychologically and emotionally, every individual to be fully present at work, whether they are telecommuting or working physically, to be engaged, to be able to work effectively in teams and contribute towards problem solving. To do that, there is a conscious effort, and that's where the challenge comes through. When you have policies that sometimes seem to favor men against women, for example, having 3 shifts or having night shifts where the law has limitations on how many women or how many hours women can have during the shift, there is a potential risk where men feel that women are being let off the hook and men are being put to more difficult jobs to do. Besides, when you're trying to promote the KPIs of gender diversity and inclusion in the company, there is a perception of an artificial dimension for men who may think that, oh, women are being promoted and pushed to make up the numbers. All these things present some challenges that have to be surmounted through a lot of engagement in discussions. The other question that made me smile also was around, is diversity and inclusion a nice to have or a must have? It's definitely a must have. I've given so many reasons in my introduction around why diversity and inclusion when it comes to the gender piece is very important. Essentially, when you have a balance of male and female, you have better decision making, as I mentioned, you have better thought processes, you have better problem solving, you have better creativity. And honestly, in my life, going to boarding school, single sex school or same sex school and a mixed school, you realize that there is more fun in the same sex, in the mixed school. You have individuals become more confident because they're able to relate to the opposite sex at a very early age. And therefore, when you grow up in that environment, when you thrive in that environment where you have both male and female, people are more comfortable, people are able to see other perspectives and different points of view and add value in every aspect of their lives. The other question I had was around how to ensure that people are no more confused around gender diversity and inclusion. Frankly, I don't understand where the confusion would come from, because about the ratios of male and female. If you had a company that had most male because of how Africa started off as having more males educated than female, the gradual process of having more female being educated and given opportunities for them to have certain roles that hitherto were perceived to be only male dominated, like engineering roles, like commercial roles, like science roles and all that. The transition and change in terms of our educational system where more women are given opportunity to be in such roles would help to have the overall impact. In our world today, when we see more women flying when it comes to doing well in such areas of academia, it suggests that the myth around having that confusion in corporate should be broken or should be demystified. Once you have women who have the capacity to excel in these areas in academia, it suggests that once they come into corporate life to sort of transfer their theory into practice, they have the same predisposition to do that. And therefore, that confusion already should be dissipated. In my conclusion remarks, I'll say that every company or every institution or every society should aim at building more women, encouraging more women to be part of whatever think tank they have, whatever problem solving they have, whatever innovative thinking they have, whatever decision-making process, whether it's at the top or at the bottom, women should be fully represented, because when you have women in that instance, in that situation, in that space, they thrive, they add more value, and eventually the company will do better. So those are my remarks in terms of comments around gender, diversity, and inclusion. Thank you.
Amazing. Wow. That was really, really deep. Thank you so much, Dr. Amuah. And I'm sure we have tons of questions for you, but then we are going to hold on to that for now and then introduce Mr. Attigah, who I can see is smiling at us from where he is, to join us now and also take us through his session. And once it's done, we'll come back with the questions that we have for you. So, Mr. Attigah, you can roll now. Thank you.
We cannot hear him.
Kelly, I think his mic is mute, so you may have to, Mr. Attigah, your mic is mute. So yeah.
Yes, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
So I said I was smiling because Doctor had said so much. I don't feel like speaking anymore, and she's made some wonderful submissions. And coming from somebody from a tech background, anybody who understands tech maybe in this era would see that as a space for men. And so when you talk about diversity and inclusion, you feel like, okay, you're talking about a boys' club that you want everybody to get involved in. And I'll start from talking about a stereotype and from something that happened in Google, where a software engineer called James Damore made a statement, and he said, let's be open about the science of human nature. And he wrote that in a memoir, and he said that the distribution of preferences and abilities of men and women differ in part due to biological causes, and these differences may explain why we don't see equal representation of women in tech and leadership. And he went on to imply that women's stronger interest is in people and is less naturally suited to being coders. And I realized that in my working career, or even in school, you find more men, or probably be in a class of so many people, you may find just one woman or even no woman. I worked at places like SoftDrive, and it was similar. You find a lot of us, so it was more like a boys' club, and probably because the women were not interested, or we didn't give them the opportunity. But when fast forward in 2010, when I started Hatua, again, we started as men. There were 2 guys who started, and it was almost a repetition of what I had gone through. So when the team was growing from 6 to 8 to 10, we still had an all male team and just one female. But we decided to move away from that and have a guiding principle that will ensure that we support and encourage women to work with us. So we decided at that point that most of the recruitments that we're going to make from that period onwards was going to be influenced by a more inclusive approach, where we would ensure that when we receive applications, or even when we put out ads, it won't have language that would deter women from trying to apply. And so in focusing on that, you realize that its ability is not necessarily an issue, but it's about overcoming the barriers. Again, I'll take all of you back. In the early days of computing, we'll say women were more represented because women more or less worked as human computers. They did a lot of the calculations. A lot of people don't know this, but this happened way back in the days. I mean, in the 40s, women were the ones doing the calculations, and the men were focusing on the hardware. When the ENIAC was built, a lot of the calculations were done by the women, and so women were more or less programmers, and then the men were just building the hardware, which was supposed to be the fancy thing. But if you look at all of that, eventually when it became a big deal, the media laid more emphasis on the hardware as compared to those who necessarily put in the work to add value to these devices or the hardware that were put out there. So for me, as an entrepreneur and as a software engineer who founded Hatua Tech, when we decided to put in a policy that will allow us to ensure that we're inclusive and we had more women on the team, we realized that there were times where you find people, your own team members, including some management members, thinking that women are not good enough or they can't be good developers. And there was a situation where one team lead said that a woman can't code. Why are you interviewing a woman? Why are you bringing a woman? And we ignored him and hired the person, and we put him on his team. After 2 weeks, the guy comes to us and says, "This lady is very good, and I'm learning new things from her." And so you realize that he's just culturally coming from a certain stereotype that, or even from the boys mindset that women are not good enough for technology, women are not good enough to do this. So currently the statistics, if I give you the statistics on our workforce right now, we have 60% of our team members being female and 40% being though generally anytime you want to hire new people or you want to work with people, you find out that women make a lower number in terms of STEM related workforce. So probably, I think globally we have like 25% of the STEM workforce being women. But women share their knowledge and they connect to their colleagues and they help their team, and this helps their business. And women bring this attitude into their managerial role. So when you give them the opportunity, they actually become better and stronger leaders than you ever think of, as compared to the men. And if you don't give them the opportunity to, you may be losing out. So businesses that do not have a proper balance tend to suffer. But there are factors that impede the diversity and inclusion, and the fact that you give women the opportunity. One factor could be education. So it could be the fact that when we start talking about technology, you're pushing the women out of the window, telling them to rather go and do science and go and do law and probably study medicine or something, as compared to building technology. But think about it. When a woman solves a problem in any space that you find yourself, they are better at it. So they should be able to have access, or should be encouraged into going into those spaces. Then there's the male and female stereotypes and perspectives. One I already said. So you could have situations where somebody says that if you hire a woman, she's going to get pregnant. And so then you are going to lose her for 9 months and probably not have her work, and women may be soft and all of those things. And so you have these stereotypes that also impede the process of having an organization that is gender diverse or is inclusive. And again, I mentioned the boys environment. So most tech spaces is, if you went to a boys school, you find similar environments in tech companies where you have more guys who sometimes, even when they're women, they forget that they're women there and would speak in ways and say things that are not appropriate. There's also the fact that there's active discouragement and lack of encouragement, and even lack of role models, and sometimes negative peer pressure and harassment that does not make women feel comfortable in playing in my space, or should I say the tech space. But at Hatua, we have a very strong policy around discrimination and harassment and inclusion. I mean, the gender policy encompasses all of these things, and we find ways to ensure that we prevent discrimination and protect everybody, especially the women. And this is our commitment to create a flexible, safe and happy workplace for everyone, especially the women. And so I heard Doctor talk about flexible where she's working from home and all. We also have that as part of our policy. So you have some of the women even come in early in the morning once they drop their kids, and then they leave earlier. So they're leaving probably at 3 or 4 to pick up their kids. And it's normal because they've opted for that option. And those who have infant babies can also sometimes bring them. We have an area where they can bring them and keep them there. So some of the nursing mothers here sometimes bring their kids to work, and it's actually not a big deal. And the policy has elements around also encouraging, if people want to get married, not preventing them or not being negative about it because you're thinking you're going to lose them. Or maternity leave, which Doctor talked about as well, which we also fully implement. And we actually, even though we are a small company, we also allow for 6 months. And she talked about sexual orientation not being something that we may dwell on in our part of the world, but in our space, you find people who are sexually different from you in terms of their orientation, and we do not allow or tolerate people to harass them in any way, because that will mean that a person comes to work and feels that the workplace is not safe for them. So we also ensure that the policy allows that. So our strategy was to implement the policy and not pretend to just have a document that says that you have a policy in place, but actually make sure that it works. And one of the things we do is during our Monday morning meetings, we'll sometimes have hours of training. We are picking parts of the policy and talking about it. Sometimes we even bring in external people. So when the issue of University of Ghana, the sex for grades thing came up, we talked about the fact that it was actually beyond sex for grades, but the fact that the overarching issue was sexual harassment. And we tried to test people in our environment by finding out what would be sexual harassment and what would not be. And you find people saying that, well, there's nothing wrong with me saying this person has a big bum and it's a nice bum. I'm like, how can you say that? And so, how can you say this to anybody? I mean, and these were like very experienced engineers talking like this. And so we had to re-echo the fact that they're saying things that are not appropriate and not acceptable. So in fact, we spent like 4 hours having somebody from outside the company come and give a talk, like, and re-emphasize what we have in our policy when it comes to like sexual harassment, because sometimes the person who's being harassed doesn't understand or doesn't know that they are being harassed, and the person who is harassing doesn't know that they are doing that. So we looked at all of those things, and we also encourage bonding activities just to ensure that women do not feel slighted in any way, the men do not feel slighted. Sometimes the women could decide to go on a women bonding activity, then the guys also do that. There are times where we do that together, but I think it helps with the sanity for everybody in our space. But just to conclude, we believe that the diversity helps us be more productive, helps us to be more creative. And in fact, if a woman was managing the home, they would do all sorts of things, from making sure everything is properly done, making sure everybody is provided for. And so it works the same way in the workplace. They ensure that we do things on schedule. They ensure that we work within budget. And so the creativity and innovation that people think about and say, oh, the woman is best fit for, is the same thing. They bring the same thing to the workplace for us. So it works for us. And they help us, or they've helped us value the work-life balance better than when we're all men or all boys. And the fact that when you push for inclusion, you also improve your retention as an organization. And Dr. talked about empathy, and I can confirm from experience and from what you're experiencing that it's something that if you have only men, you won't appreciate. Women are awesome listeners. So again, if you are pushing for inclusion, you are going to get the best communication from them, because they are not going to just react like a man would just react egotistically or in ways that sometimes you can't explain. But I mean, and when it comes to coaching younger team members, you can be sure that because women are nurturing, you will get that. I don't know how in any organization that really wants to grow, and whether tech or anything, if you really want to grow, you would be doing yourself a lot of disservice if you are not pushing for diversity and inclusion. And again, I'm sitting here wearing a lot of hats, but who does it better than women in terms of multitasking? I mean, so, and when you have challenges and you are trying to handle crisis, again, so I'm sorry, the men listening might think that I'm giving women too much props, but this is the reality. And if you are living it, then it's easier to talk about it. But just for takeaways, I think people who also attempt to sometimes push for inclusion and diversity sometimes end up practicing tokenism rather than proper implementation of policy work. And if you are going to carry out tokenism, I think for me, I feel it's some sort of misogyny. So then don't even do it at all, because then you are trying to probably tick boxes and really carry out the thing. So instead of doing that, you should develop and adopt a policy and ensure that diversity is imperative for your business. And also understand that women would face unique barriers that are not obvious to us men. So if you want to do that, then the best way to do this is ensure that you go through a conscious and a determined effort to make it happen. So thank you very much. I'll be sitting back and waiting for comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Attigah, for everything that you said so far. We've really listened really well to you to know, especially because you talked about tech. That's not an area that lots of people want to get into. And the case studies you presented, I think, are really meaningful, really relevant to the discussion that we're having. So thank you very much. And to Dr. Hazzel, Dr. Amuah, I should say, as well. It's been very enlightening listening to you talk about how gender diversity operates generally within the corporate scene. That's been really useful. And to everyone, thanks for attending this webinar. Our team at Heighten Up is really interested in corporate gender diversity issues. And just to let you know, this is part of a series of webinars that we have lined up for the future to expose this topic more and more to companies, more and more to individuals. So one step at a time, we get organizations that are more diverse. I'm conscious of our time, but as well, I'd want to give the opportunity for anyone here now who may have a question or two for our speakers. I think now would be the time to take one or two questions before our speakers leave us. Okay, in the absence of any question from our participants, I personally have two questions that I want to ask. One being, this is to both of you, but maybe I'll address Dr. Hazzel, Dr. Amuah first. For companies that are thinking about getting started, so those who haven't gone into it, haven't done anything about it, are just hearing about gender diversity and are interested because they see the relevance of it, interested because they see the importance of it, what would be the biggest piece of advice you'd have for them for getting started with diversity and inclusion?
So thanks for that question. I think it's a good question. There is always a starting point. So my humble recommendation would be, first of all, companies who have not started yet should take their data, check the gender breakdown across levels. So the total company breakdown and then across levels, they should just check the gender breakdown.
Yeah.
Begin to work at the low-hanging fruits. Where can we quickly address gender balance issues or have opportunities to take advantage of? My second recommendation. My third one would be the very naughty areas. Nehemiah Attigah mentioned STEM being a very tricky area. And indeed, I mentioned in my discourse also that to attract engineers is like pulling a tooth out of a snake's mouth. You don't have too many female engineers who even want to practice engineering.
Yes.
Who in engineering, they come to corporate, they want to be in different departments, and you're wondering, you have this great skill, just practice it, you know? So to start with, those are very critical areas you want to put in a long-term plan to close out. Areas like commercial also. To be a salesperson is a tough job. So how do you close out long-term planning in those areas? And you also realize that when you have a hierarchy in the organization, the unionized employees, majority are usually male, because of the type of work that unionized staff or semi-skilled labor usually do. So although they are semi-skilled labor, it doesn't take away from them their basic common sense, for want of a better word, their basic commitment to work and their basic ability to get things done. So you also want to make sure you have a balance of women in that area. And very importantly, your executive team, it's important to have that balance because of the boardroom thinking and the level that reports to them. So you realize that in what I'm saying, literally, what the whole organization to have that balance in terms of gender, but you must start from somewhere, you know. So you start first by looking at your data, looking at the low-hanging fruits, the naughty areas like the engineering team, the STEM guys, the science people, the math people, the sales team, then the rest of the organization, then the top, and then the line reporting to the top. Once you have these laid out, then you focus on looking at the rest of the organization to make sure there's gender parity coming through. Your policies should speak to attracting and retaining women.
Yes. I quite agree with that. I think in the long run, after you've started, there needs to be policies that hold practices in place. And I think that sustains the practice for even longer than you plan for.
Exactly. And then your workspace environment should also be more conducive to have the balance. And then also the culture of how people treat each other should also speak to making sure people feel comfortable to work in that environment. So those are the key things I would say for companies starting up on the awareness of gender diversity and inclusion.
Okay, thanks for that. And Mr. Attigah, during your delivery, you mentioned something about tokenism, which I thought was interesting, because a lot of the times when tokenism comes up, it becomes a source of debate, because then males feel excluded, or males feel some sort of disadvantage. But there's also a school of thought that says, well, if we're going to start gender diversity, we should start from tokenism before we get into building structures, etc., etc. But now the question that I want to ask is there a way that we can approach gender diversity so that it doesn't feel exclusive for men in our workplaces?
Yes, I think there are lots of ways of going about it. And the reason why tokenism sometimes the problem is, or it is a problem, is that sometimes people put women in places just to put them there and expect them to feel so that they can say, you see, she can't do it. Expecting us to have a woman there, and then we put a woman there and she couldn't do it. So sometimes they tend to do that. But let's look at it. Men have always been at the advantage for a long time. So I hate maybe a strong word. It's like the fact that sometimes people complain about maybe saying that this role you are hiring a woman or having a preference for a woman, or trying to, because if you are looking to bring a balance, then like the doctor said, once you have the data or you have looked at the numbers and you are trying to create a certain environment, it shouldn't be a problem. The thing about feeling exclusive for men, how can you point a certain area in our society where you say men are at a disadvantage?
So for instance, in education, for instance, we say if for medicine or for different courses, if a guy has the aggregate 10, he will be accepted. If a girl has 13 or 12, she'll be accepted. So in that instance, boys are saying, well, how come we've all gone through the same high school system and they're given more room
but
than we are? Yes.
Now think about it. Over the years, women have been the ones who have been disadvantaged.
That's true.
We are trying to get to a point where we have that balance or some sort of equity. And you cannot continue to say, okay, let's all compete at the same level. Even when, should I say, culturally or traditionally, at home, they say the girl should be in the kitchen with her mother, helping out and all of those things. And then the boy is either in his room learning or playing video games and all of those things.
Yep.
But she's already disadvantaged by society calls the values of a Ghanaian woman or an African woman, because they're judging you on your ability to cook and your ability to do certain things. And so if you are going to have to bridge the gap, policies like allowing girls with slightly lower grades to get into a university, there's nothing, and that is not tokenism. That's actually putting in place a process or a policy that will allow us to eventually get some sort of balance or get numbers. Because think our girls wanting to rather do arts and staying away from science courses, or somebody going to do engineering and rather wanting to become a salesperson in a bookshop, or there was a time where we had this client, and all the sales were actually engineers, and I was wondering why they had gone to school and spent years to do this, and they've come and they are selling boots. They're selling boots. It's not like it was any specialized boots, but I'm saying that if we consciously encourage and actively discourage, then we'll get there. We'll get that balance. People, you're watching a TV show and you're watching a panel, and they are all men.
Mm-hmm.
You can't find women to discuss the subject, especially when it applies to everybody. So, and then when you tell people, they're like, but there's nobody. It's because people are not looking. They are not making the effort to find alternatives. They are used to, excuse me, but used to hearing Kweku Bako on Newsfile all the time. So if they want an opinion of someone else, they are not going to look for. The alternative will be another man rather than looking for somebody else, especially a woman, to get their perspective and get their insight on the subject. So we always go for what is close to us or what we are used to. You are used to giving men the opportunity to speak all the time in the boardroom, and so you are not going to ask the woman her opinion. And it applies in all sorts of facets of our lives. So everywhere we go, whether it's church or school or everywhere, you find that the first alternative is when you're growing up, your father was the one talking all the time. Your mother was usually silent and maybe following orders, or her opinion was never heard. And so you're following that same thing. You're just following it. It doesn't work.
Okay.
If we follow that route, what would then happen is we would never get to the point where we can say, okay, there's a good percentage of equity in the area of inclusion.
I absolutely agree with you when you say that sometimes lowering the standards is a way of inviting more disadvantaged or more marginalized people to get into the arena or to get into the circle. So that was really useful what you said. Thank you. I'm conscious we're running out of time, and just checking if there's any final questions from the team now. If anyone has.
Hi, Josephine.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, this is Kelly. Yeah, like you said, we are conscious of the fact that we are running late, and Dr. Amuah actually has to go on a journey now. But if she's still with us, I have two quick questions for her, then we wrap up. The question I would like to ask is, how do we effectively monitor? And you spoke about the compressed week. You do Monday to Thursday, and then Fridays is a bit flexible. How do we effectively monitor employees who are working from home, who probably do not use the time of work for something else which is not productive and contributes to the organization's productivity? And the second question is, does gender diversity and inclusion, the activities that you are carrying out, cost your organization any financial amount of money? And if it does, how do you cover that? How do you cover up for those costs that you have to incur?
Let me start with the second one in terms of the cost. So there is a cost, and the cost is the upfront cost or the short-term cost. Because if you have to have 3 odd, 4 odd people going on maternity leave, 4 odd men going on paternity leave, it means that they're on leave, they're not working, you're paying for that. So there is a cost. But imagine having a very happy employee, productivity shoots through the roof, you retain them, they are committed, they are doing their best, they are loyal, they are your brand ambassadors. You can't quantify that because the medium to long-term benefit will show. If you have to always replace people because you're having a high turnover, the cost of training and people coming through your organization with probably higher salary requests versus those who are already working for you, you can't really quantify the two. I mean, definitely the long-term, medium long-term costs is a savings, not a cost. So upfront, you'd have a dip in the pocket, but really, if you think about the benefits, to even have a happy workforce, I mean, who can really quantify that? So that's how the cost is actually positioned. And the second question, or the first and my second, was the fact that how do you measure effectiveness when people are working from home? You can measure. Presence in terms of if they're logged in is obvious from their laptops. How they're responding to emails is obvious. The work they do on a Friday, if there's a Friday they're taking off, like I am taking off Friday, I actually even work better because I start working from 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm saving time from driving. So I don't get up early to drive and go to work, and saving time in traffic coming home. So whilst I would close at 5 and quickly pack my laptop in my bag, I can be behind my desk at home till 6:30. So I'm actually even giving more time to the company than what I would give if I was physically present. Besides, for myself, for example, my kids are in boarding school, so I'm home alone literally all the time. It's peace and quiet, so I'm able to concentrate more. I even eat quickly because I'm eating alone. I'm not eating with heaven knows how many odd people in the canteen or in groups. So I'm eating quickly. I'm eating my lunch in 15 minutes. I'm done and I'm back to work. So I am more effective. And we propound that philosophy of being more effective by working from home. So it's about integrity. It is about the way we trust people to do the right thing. And when you give trust to people in a way that makes them feel valued, they hold on to the trust and they try to excite and delight you by proving that the trust was actually in the right place. So far, we have not had any issues with reference to telecommuting or working from home. The day we have issues, it will not be a policy issue, it will be more of a performance issue where people are not demonstrating the right behaviors. So that's how we look at it if we begin to have issues around telecommuting.
All right, thank you very much. And then thank you, Dr. Amuah. Guys, you can join me, thank her. She's been with us right from the start. Actually had to put aside a journey that she was making to Takrady just so she can be with us.
Wow.
So we are extremely grateful for your time, and we look forward to having you. This is a subject that we can't exhaust in one session, so we would definitely call on you again to join us and explore some other aspects of it. Ms. Attigah, I still have one question for you, and once I'm done, I will invite Dorida, who has a question for the resource persons. You mentioned that you currently have about 60 to 40% percentage for females and males respectively in your organization. I would like to know, has this influenced or more or less like helped you become more competitive over your other colleagues in the same space when it comes to maybe getting contracts or delivering on projects?
Yes. So as I said, when I talked about the benefits of having a gender policy and having inclusion in your work environment, I specifically laid emphasis on the fact that having women on our team has made us more productive and more creative, and we are able to stay on schedule and also work within budget. And also because when I say the women tend to have better human relations, it means that engaging with our clients is much more improved than before, which ensures that we retain our clients. And also it means that when we are even engaging with new clients, we are able to get them. And so it definitely gives us a competitive advantage. And so it's always, I'll say it's more of a greater benefit than any form of disservice to us. Maybe if we knew that, we would have gone on that path from day one when we started out.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Attigah. So we will take a question from Dorida now, and then we will wrap up.
All right, thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, Doreen, we can hear you.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And to the speakers, their presentation has been highly insightful. I would want to find out something on paternity leave. I'm not too sure if Hatua Tech is currently practicing that, if they have any policy on paternity leave. But to Dr. Amuah, are there any benefits to the parents, first of all, also to the company and then the nation with your paternity leave policies? I don't know, maybe other companies will adopt this and it will probably go a long way to help. Thank you.
Okay, so since Dr. is on her way, she can go ahead and answer first before I jump in. So
it's about equality. You know, you don't give things to men and leave. So I mean, leave men. And so you want to have a happy workforce. You don't want to take the table of giving policies to women without men. And why aren't we giving same months to men? Reason being that women bear the babies, not men, and therefore if you're going to equity in that regard, you don't give free bone to men who haven't done much apart from planting the seed for the baby to be conceived. So that's how we manage the policy around it. I'm sure you can tell I'm going down my staircase. Mr. Attigah, you can see me, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so for us to yes, we actually give not 1 month but a few weeks off for the men, and then we also saw the flexible working hours for nursing mothers applies for the men as well, so because probably sometimes they have to go home and help out, and so because of that they also, and like you said, it's about having a happy employee. And once they know that they don't have a preoccupation of how their wives are faring or how the babies are faring and how maybe the wife requires a certain amount of help, you'll be sure that they will do what they have to do, because they know they can leave at certain times, or they know they have the flexibility of coming in and out at certain times. And we also give them the opportunity to telecommute. So you probably even get to the point where you are giving internet access at home so that you can work from home without issues. So all you have to do is check in your code. If, for instance, you're a developer, you're checking in your code anywhere you are. If you are not a developer, so far as we are able to provide evidence that what you are supposed to do, you've done it, or you've completed your task, I think everybody is happy. They are happy, we are happy. So yes, we do have that policy in place. It's not 1 month like Diageo, but I'm sure they are not complaining yet. So
I'm sure you'd get there. You'd get there. It takes time, but and sometimes more people demand, more fathers, more people demand to say, "Oh, this would be more beneficial to us." So, baby steps.
Yeah. I've heard 2 of the women say they want to have twins so they can longer. Probably they feel that once they have 2 babies, then it won't be 6.
No. Even if you have 2 babies, it doesn't make a difference. It's one bird.
I know.
Even if you have 20 babies at a go, it's just one bird.
The politics of it, huh?
I know, but you know how they're thinking, oh, okay, 6 months, that's nice. Okay, when it's my turn, I want to have twins so that I can stay longer. I'm like, the policy is not for, I mean, even if you have triplets, to wait for 6 months. Anyway, so this was good. Thank you, Heighten Up, for the opportunity. I'll be available to do follow-up sessions when I'm required to do so.
All right. Thank you so much, first of all, to our resource persons, Dr. Amuah and Mr. Attigah. This has been a very insightful session, and the comments we are getting from the back end says that you have done a very good job, and we are looking forward to having a future session once more with you. I would also like to thank all the participants for joining us this time. I can see Madam Regina Ejari, as part of the participants, and we are so grateful for joining us. We are looking forward to hosting you one time in the future very soon. And then also, like I mentioned earlier on, Heighten Up, we are focused on workplace gender diversity and inclusion. We launched earlier this year our Corporate Gender Diversity Index, which helps rank businesses and organizations based on the activities they are carrying out to promote gender diversity and inclusion. Look forward to that, and do follow us on our social media platforms. Get in touch through the contact numbers that you see currently, and let's get interactive. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on our first edition of the Corporate Gender Diversity webinar, and you will hear from us soon ahead of the second one. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good weekend
Bye.
too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.